Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Cynthia Quijano, and I am the Director and Principal Consultant here at Change Differently. So I am doing this webinar in a bit of a different location today, so hopefully you'll be able to hear me well, and you'll be able to see my screen. So today we're going to be talking about communicating through change from an OD perspective. But before we start, I'll just start with a small introduction of Change Differently. And actually today is the official launch of Change Differently. So I founded Change Differently after working with numerous organizations across sectors and mainly realizing that a lot of organizations were thinking really short term when it comes to change. And we're really looking at that longer term sustainable success. They're focusing on quick fixes that would get them through a little bit of a bad patch, but not looking at the wider picture. So the purpose of Change Differently is actually to help organizations understand and embrace an organizational culture based on engagement, which ultimately drives long-term sustainable success. And we trust that by putting people first and at the heart of everything the organization does, change does happen a lot quicker, better, and actually creates innovation for our own organization. At the same time as enhancing the purpose and the bottom line of an organization. So yes, today we're going to talk about communicating through change, and we're going to look at it from a bit of a different lens. We're going to be looking at it from an organization development perspective. Now you'll be able to tell a lot of this is actually not that hard, but it's actually when we're in the business change that things sometimes get a bit more complicated. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the importance of it. And then we're going to talk a bit about things that actually the leaders need to do, but also the best and kind of scenario, the ideal scenario, but also what would that not ideal scenario look like and how you can actually still manage communications while you're going through more difficult types of changes. So first, before we begin, I thought I'd get you to start thinking. Take a couple seconds, maybe 30 seconds, just to think, what is your instant reaction when somebody says, our organization is going to go through change? What was that gut reaction you had? Was it a, woohoo, we're going to go through change, I'm so excited? Or was it a more like panic of anxiety and, oh my God, what does that mean for me? Or was it a, oh no, here we go again? Whatever it was, whether it was positive or negative or that feeling that you've seen it all before, this is usually because change is not managed as well as it possibly could be within organizations. Change is looked at in a very different way, and actually change is very, very rarely communicated. So it looks very much like this cartoon. This is Bob, our secret change agent. And it's all very secret, hush hush, and no one really knows what they're doing. And that's kind of what creates these gut reactions of going, oh my God, change. But actually, if we start thinking about change and actually implementing it in a better way and changing differently, what we are is actually, it's okay. Well, why don't we just do something a bit weird and odd and actually tell our employees what's going on? So this is probably not massively bad common sense. However, sometimes, like I said, we get into trickier things and we don't actually do it right. So what happens when we don't do it right? What happens when you don't communicate change? And well, first of all, there's the rumor mill. So people start hearing things, half portion of things, and they start inventing their own little story of what's happening in an organization. They then kind of works like the game Chinese whispers, tell somebody else, to tell somebody else, to tell somebody else, but not a complete picture. So everybody kind of starts making these fragments and start making very funny looking puzzle of what the real change is. You also start creating a culture, a bit of a them and us culture, an inner circle who actually know everything that's going on, and the outer circle, which is basically everyone else who has no clue. And this actually creates a lot of resentment in organizations because people feel that they weren't trusted or they weren't good enough to actually be part of that change. So not very engaging, and a lot of these people then kind of get angry and frustrated. It also causes a lot of mistrust because especially if you're not talking to people and you're not telling them what's going on, they will stop trusting what you're saying. They will start thinking you have a hidden agenda, and sometimes they will think that you know more than you know, even if you don't actually know what's going on yourself as a manager, for example. And it's all because everything's kind of behind closed doors. So this whole sense of suspicion and actually saying not trusting organizations is really hard. And it's really hard because as human beings, trust takes a long time to build, and it really only takes 1 second to actually bringing it all crashing down. It also creates confusion. People are not really sure what they do. They're not really sure how they fit with the organization anymore. They're not really sure how the change is going to affect them. They don't understand what the role is anymore or what's expected from them. So all this confusion just really generates a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, and a lot of concern. And this all leads to lower engagement. A lot of employees that might have been really engaged and willing to do a lot of stuff for the organization might actually feel slightly jaded, betrayed. And to be honest, it means productivity will be down. People are going to be spending more time worrying about what's happening and what's changing than they will be worrying about what's actually important, the job. So yes, productivity will go down, and so will probably your profit if you're a profit-based organization. There will also be a decrease in well-being because all this anxiety and stress, all it causes is more anxiety and stress. It causes organizations to actually lose a lot of staff because they will be actually ending up going sick and missing days of work. So sickness absence is bound to go up while you're going through this massive secret change that nobody knows about. Or if you're not communicating well, because it just might mean that you are communicating things, but not everything that's needed. And what's the worst of them? What happens if you don't communicate? Nothing. Nada. Zilch. Nobody will know what's actually expected of them. No one will actually know what's expected to change. And therefore, everything will stay the same. Which then causes the reaction of when people go, we have to go through some kind of organizational change, and people go, oh, no, not that again, because it hasn't resulted before, because it's not worked out fine, and actually nothing ever changes. So this is actually probably one of the worst things about not communicating through change, that actually nothing changes. So I'm going to take you kind of back to basics, because I think if we look at this with this different lens, the organization development lens, change in communications during the times of change actually go back to values. And it actually goes back to that intrinsic part within organizations and the way that change agents or people responsible for change, whether leaders, OD practitioners, change management consultants, change agents within an organization, really need to take into account. So we're going to go back to some of the OD core values, and I'm going to talk about them all. And then I'm going to talk to you about the ones that really make a difference. So OD core values are based on humanistic, optimistic, and democratic philosophy. And sounds very fluffy, I know, but it actually goes down to these kind of basic values. We believe humans are naturally good. We accept and perceive diversity of thoughts and advantage. People are more than resources, and they're a complete human being. So we focus on the whole individual and on the individual as a whole. Trust, not being afraid to take risks, collaboration, inclusivity, open and transparent communication, justice and equity, and integrity. So these are kind of some of the core values that a lot of OD theorists talk about. We talk about Packard and Bennett and Lippitt and a lot of these original OD practitioners talking about the humanistic and democratic philosophies and this optimistic part of actually we believe people want to do a good job when they go into work. People actually want to excel, and people want to feel part of something. From a humanistic perspective, we believe that every single person has the right to actually collaborate and contribute to their organization. And this actually includes this whole inclusivity piece, the diversity piece, and being democratic means everybody can actually have a role within changing an organization. So if we look at these three, especially trust, inclusivity, open and transparent communication, these are the reasons why that OD lens opens a whole new kind of perception when we're talking about communicating through change, because these are the things that we want to make sure we keep going through the whole change process. We want to make sure that employees feel included in the process, so they're engaged and there's less resistance to change. We want to make sure our communication is open and transparent to build that trust and that following through the change process. And that's basically it. It sounds really simple, but if anybody's gone through a lot of change within an organization, you know it really isn't as simple as it sounds. So, what is the role of leaders? Leaders are key when we're talking about organizational change. Why? Because they're the ones that need to remodel the change, whether it's a behavioral change, whether it's a cultural change, whether it's actually adopting a new process or a new system. The leaders need to role model that change that we're talking about. They need to be the first communication channel. So if, for example, we're going to be going through a whole new culture and then we have a new strategy, what we want is either face-to-face, video, written message from the leader kind of explaining what is going to be happening, why is it happening, when is it happening. We need the leaders to kind of paint the picture. What can be better within the future of the organization when we go through this change? Again, it doesn't really matter what change, even if it's a new system, and a new IT system. The leader needs to be able to kind of create this idea of actually what the system's actually going to allow us to do is track everything and have a lot more customer information, and we're going to be able to serve our customers better and actually deliver better services this way. That's just one way to paint a picture. Leaders need to keep communicating during the process, so it's not good for them just to kind of communicate that one time and then never again. We need them to kind of keep up to date with everybody, whether that is going through a management circle, so whether they kind of communicate at certain levels and then trust their managers to lead the rest of the communications, or whether they do updates themselves. I would suggest the latter, whether that's written, so it might be just an email every month, kind of going, well, this is what's happening within our change program, and kind of keeping up to date with everything. So they need to be visible during the change process. So this could actually just be through means of communication, whether it's, again, videos, newsletters, an email, meetings, just a way to kind of make sure that they are still up there and in the mind of everybody else in the organization. They need to support their managers to engage their staff within change. So by them being role models, they'll empower the rest of the leaders to kind of be role models, and then managers to kind of take that responsibility to engage their staff in the change. So actually by painting the picture and allowing everybody to know where they fit into that bigger scheme of the change program, each manager will be better equipped to do the same with their group of staff. And that's what we want. We want everybody kind of starting to mold together. Leaders need to be open to receiving feedback and suggestions, mainly because in a lot of organizations, and we think a lot of more traditional organizations, there's quite a hierarchical structure still. And actually what we want to be doing is during the whole change process is feeding up and feeding down and feeding sideways. So if leaders are open to suggestions, what they'll find is that sometimes people that are actually doing the work will have really good ideas about what needs to be changed, or can probably pick out some of the things that might need changing through the change. But they'll also be able to see what's actually working and what they're doing right and how things are actually progressing. Have open conversations with staff. So ideally, you would want the leaders to be able to approach staff and to have these really honest conversations of what the change is and why it's happening, and actually be able to kind of coach and mentor staff through that change as well. And this kind of leaves them in a very nice spot because it creates a lot of trust and rapport with the bigger organization. But also, it's the role of leaders to ensure consistency of message. And this is probably one of the hardest ones within the world of change, because things happen so fast, or if we're doing a new culture, it's hard for everybody kind of to perceive or understand the same thing. So actually ensuring consistent message is what really key role for leaders during the times of change. So for example, let's say we are changing from one building to another. What the excitement should be about the new building and the possibilities, and this needs to be a consistent message throughout. What we don't want is actually a message more about boxes or people going into open spaces or closed spaces and how much they're dreading that. What we need is that excitement and that consistency in that excitement within the messaging. So when we're thinking about communicating through change, what are the key questions we need to be answering? This is really important because this is actually what's going to get you up and out and actually get your messages very, very correctly. So what is changing? Is it our culture? Is it leadership? Is it a structure? What's actually changing within the organization? More importantly, why is it changing? Why do we need to change? What's caused this need for us to actually look at things differently? Is it that we just want to improve? Is it that we are in a bit of a financial situation? Is it because we're evolving and trying to find a way to grow? Why is this change happening? How will it change? So how will the world look once we've gone through this whole transition? How will it feel? What does that mean for me? And this is one of the most important questions throughout communication. What's in it for me? As human beings, we do have this feeling that anytime somebody does manage change because it's taking us out of our comfort zone, we immediately want to know what's in it for me. So actually, this is coupled with why one of the most important questions to answer around your communication. Think about all the benefits this new change will have for your employees. How will I need to change? What are the implications for me? So this again is very close to what's in it for me, but it's actually looking at what are the implications for the person. What is it that they'll need to personally own and change themselves? For example, if we're talking about an organizational culture, they may need to change some behaviors they have within the organization. Or they might need to upskill in certain areas. And this is kind of the things that we're now starting to talk a bit more detail, but more at the individual level. Is this change good or bad? Undoubtedly, this is the first question that people will be wondering. So once you start answering the rest of the questions, what you're trying to create is this excitement that change is actually a good thing. So I always look for the positive messages, look for the key things that are actually going to be different and they're going to be supporting your employees, things that are going to support the organization, things that are going to create massive success stories. And those massive success stories don't have to be like a lot of profit or having 10,000 more customers in for your organization. It could be something as simple as actually this process was so convoluted that it's actually just going to save us time. And that's a massive success as well. And again, what will the world look like once a change happens? So actually having these key questions in mind every time you're creating a communication, no matter whether it's a first communication about the change or whether it's updates along the way, if you keep these in mind, they'll really help with that progress and update for people. So we have the ideal scenario. What would be the ideal scenario for a change and the communications around it? Well, ideally, we'd like to be able to plan change with our employees. So actually do a whole system change and maybe even have the whole system in the room. I usually be able to include them from the beginning, from a place of actually saying, well, actually what we're looking is to evolve to that next step. What do we need? And have employees actually really take part of that conversation. And actually this will help staff stream and start connecting both mind and heart with the change. And this way they'll actually own it at the end as well. You would ideally like to have time to plan and implement and review what you're changing. So you continually have that feedback with staff going, well, this is what we changed. Has it worked? Has it not worked? What's kind of the next step? You'd want to engage staff and help them influence each other. So actually have that kind of key influencer being able to kind of help you out while you're changing. So it's actually having key influencers in place that work as change agents and kind of rally up and engage their own colleagues. So actually it's more exciting if your colleague says, you know what, this is actually really exciting, this is what we're doing and it's innovative and it's going to change our business. But also like engage staff in the way that they actually own the process. So maybe some of them are in charge of actually creating part of the change with their teams and then implementing it. And then the leader will have a bit less of a hands-on role, and they will be the ones in charge of inspiring but not implementing. And this makes communication a lot effortless because everybody kind of knows what they're doing, everybody's on the same page, everybody's talking to each other on a daily basis, everybody kind of knows where they're headed. And it makes it so great because everybody knows every single thing about questions: how, when, where, why. And people talk to each other, and then your communication channels, so your more formal communication channels like email or videos or a paper, actually work as a backup. So these are actually just there to make sure the message is consistent across the board and just as a bit of a more formal reminder. And this actually creates really good thing because actually staff then really believe in the change that's going on. They believe it's part of an evolution, and it becomes more of an everyday activity. So they'll start getting used to change. They'll start looking for changes. They'll start looking for improvements and ways to actually help their organization grow. It creates really innovative ideas because actually what you're giving is employees permission to come up with new things, but you're also giving them permission to go and implement them. And it creates this very nice scenario of a constant evolving organization. So that's obviously our ideal scenario. We would all like to work in change environments that way. It's a lot easier, it's a lot more proactive. But what has happened is in the world, because of our economic crisis and like a lot of external factors, we tend to work more in this environment, difficult type of change scenario. Now, this could be because we're actually dealing with something that needs to be done quickly, because it's being forced to us by an external environment. So there might not be that much time for consultation because actually what we need is something really, really fast. But it also might be a sensitive type of change. It's something that you really can't tell everyone until you have everything figured out. For example, that includes mergers and acquisitions most of the time. So what do we do in these circumstances? Well, you still want to ensure that you're working with the team and you're not a leader or a change agent within an organization all by yourself. Partly because this will keep you quite objective, and partly because this will generate more ideas. And it will help you really plan that message and the tone of the message, because that's really important. So if you think about our questions, we are actually looking for that positive side. So even if your change is due to financial pressures, what you want to sound is excited and create a positive vision of what that change is. And leaders need to kind of have a team who they trust to actually talk to, and they need to be open and transparent with that team. So no hidden agenda with that small team that's going to be involved from the beginning. And they need to help and make the team understand that they trust them and they understand that the project's confidential until they kind of get all the nooks and crannies and are able to share it with the wider staff. They need to do this from a place from the heart. So I think the best way to do this is actually focusing on the people. So actually saying that actually if anything leaks from the room, what it will create unnecessary panic, anxiety, and probably a lot of misunderstandings that will make things a lot more difficult for them going forward. So ensure that somehow, even if it is a sensitive change, you have a way to kind of get that staff feedback. I'm not saying doing it secretly. What I'm saying is maybe have a couple of representatives or people that you know are key influencers in the fact that they will probably be a bit more on board if you involve them and they're people you can trust to keep things confidential. Maybe have those. Maybe use your unions. Sometimes unions are a lot more involved from the start in mergers and acquisitions. Um, it could be that you just have a couple of people who you know well who are more people focused than yourself just to keep you in check. And communication becomes a bit more vital for these types of changes because it's not necessarily driven in such an inclusive way as we would like to in most OD projects. It might be that the inclusivity bit comes in later. But what we really have to focus is actually finding all those benefits first, making sure that we know exactly what the most positive things are about changing and creating this exciting and inspiring message to go out with. And then once we know what's happening, we want to communicate as soon as possible. So once we know, do. So this could be, for example, if you're going through a merger acquisition and you've been looking at potential buyers and you finally know who's going to be buying out your company, what you need to do is instantly start creating a bit more communication, a bit more buzz, and actually saying, well, why is it good that we are merging or we're being acquired by this other company? What are the benefits for us as employees? What are the benefits that we'll see in the business? What actually start creating this kind of vision and this picture, and then find a tone and consistent message you want to draw out. So, for example, you might be acquiring a business or being acquired by a business that has a complementary product. So, what I actually going to let you do is actually reach other markets you hadn't thought of. So, this is fantastic, isn't it? So, this is kind of the thing you need to probably focus on having the tone of the message of how much growth the company can now have just by being acquired by this other company. And keeping that what's in it for me. So this will be very important. The why and what's in it for me will become even more important for these kind of change scenarios. Visibility will also be very important because if the leader kind of retracts and hides, people will get suspicious straight away. And then people and leaders will be branded as not trustworthy. And this were some scenarios where maybe even managers might not be privy to all the information. People will think they are. And it would create some more mistrust and disengagement down the line. You also want to make sure that in your communications, you keep updated with the team. So you tell them things as soon as possible, this information is ready, and you kind of calm and relax people with the tone of the messages. You can start answering their concerns even before they start. So if you already have that employee voice within your organization, it'll be a lot easier because you already know maybe what will be concerning for people regarding the change. So let's say you're going, again, mergers and acquisitions is probably the easiest one here. And you have a bit of staff that you trust and to be like the employee voice while you're planning the change. They might start thinking about questions around that their colleagues would ask, like, does that mean there's going to be job losses? What happens if my role's duplicated? Will I have more chance of progression? All these questions you can start answering before you start going out. And what you'll create is a very great thing. You'll create a very positive message of what the change is. And you'll create like a Q&A or FAQs about things that might actually come up in these conversations. What I would recommend is that if it is a difficult type of change, whether it's a restructure or a merger and acquisition, is actually to have a bit more face-to-face time. So face-to-face communication becomes a really good channel, but you always need to have more than one in this case. And make sure that you have clear roles and expectations from everybody and a clear timeline. And even though maybe the team cannot be included in the decision of what's going to change, well, you can just start including them in the implementation. So if we're merging and acquiring a company, you might actually start thinking about things that will need to be changed, like maybe the logistics of the organization. So you start involving your logistics team in there of actually talking and saying, well, we have this kind of opportunity to start off and relook at our processes. What shall we do? And actually, this is a very good way to start creating that engagement within something that may not be as pleasant. So you start including them in that implementation stage. Let them have a voice, even if it's disagreement. So when you're first communicating, we're going to actually have to restructure our organization. You need to do this in an environment where staff still feel free to say what they think. Because one thing you'll realize is the staff may not agree, but if you communicate and manage change in a way that's inclusive, in a way that people are up to date, they may not agree, but they will respect you for it. And they will keep trusting you. And this is what we want. They will later be able to kind of experiment the good things about the change. And literally, this is what you want. You want to create engaged employees or employees that are willing kind of to stick through it, even if they don't agree necessarily with everything that's going on. And actually, when you're communicating vital messages, just more channel. So here are a couple of hints and tips, just overall around communicating through change. And this is both for the good and the bad. So having initial communication from a leader is priceless. If you can do a video and you can use a tool like video, please use it. It really helps for dispersed locations, and it's a way to get the message out to everybody at the same time. Constant communication. A lot of people say you can't have too much communication, but what we want is to have communication drips that are actually relevant and important and kind of answer our questions, especially the why and what's in it for me. Always use at least 2 communication channels for vital pieces. So let's say there's a massive update, you want to maybe send an email and a newsletter or a video and a face-to-face meeting. And that way you're actually covering a bit more of your bases. Make sure communication is two-way, so make sure staff can also voice their ideas and have their voice heard. And communication can really help create an ownership of change across the board. So maybe the leader doesn't have to be involved in every chain communication. Maybe depending on what the project is, maybe one area of the organization could take a bit more ownership. and create this lateral kind of potential communication as well. Because actually, the worst that can happen in a change is different areas kind of working in silos and not communicating with each other. And it's like building a car, but not really knowing what model. So you have the wrong engine with the wrong tires. You don't really want that. Um, Use social media and technology to your advantage. And this is really good for dispersed and remote workers. It's really good if you have a lot of locations, or if you're a big multinational, but also really good for smaller companies that you might all actually be really busy during times of change. So actually social media, technology, Yammer, all these things can really be useful channels. If communication is confidential, so if it is mainly one of these more less lovely change projects, maybe choose the appropriate channels. There you might not want to use Facebook or Yammer or things where things can leak. You might want a bit more of a secure app. You may want to do more things face to face and less written, and things until you actually know what you can actually say. Involve key influencers. Again, these are not necessarily leaders. These are people within the organizations that have influence. They may be maybe a colleague in the team that's really well respected. It might be someone from the mailroom that has access to everybody else. I would say they're people that usually will make someone listen to them, and it's actually really good because then you have them. I'd also say involve some of your naysayers, so that's just me, because actually naysayers have changed. If you start involving them, will turn, start believing in it. So not a bad idea to start engaging them from the beginning if you can. If it's a more tricky type of change, you might not want to. Ensure tone and messages are consistent across the board. Again, this has to do with consistency and the fact that if we communicate constantly, it will create this consistent message. But just in case, check language and double check. So for this, I have a bit of an example. I worked with an organization where we were relocating staff from one building to another. And we have an external person kind of look and create some of our communications to begin with. And what we realized is that the language they were using was not very adequate for the change process, because it wasn't just a relocation project. We were actually changing the way people were going to work. And there was a lot of sensitivities at play, there's a lot of emotions at play. And I remember reading one line within one of the initial newsletters that I was just proofreading, because that was my job beginning of it. I would proofread, and then I became kind of more leading in the change communication piece. But it was the piece sounded like we were moving boxes, not humans. And this is the thing, you have to be a bit more careful, because if I had read that as an employee that was already feeling hurt, I would feel like I wasn't being heard, or I wasn't being taken care of. When actually that's not was not our intention at all. Part of why we created these newsletters was the staff to have consistent communication. So it's all about language and double checking. And if you have a comms experts within your team, this is a great way to use their expertise actually in the language and tone. So these have been hints and tips. I know I've gone quite fast, and I'm hoping you've gotten a lot of information out of it. Um, our next webinar is the 21st of April. There's a time difference, so we won't be doing the 4 o'clock slot. We're doing a 2:30 slot, and it's going to be about engagement within cross culture, so that multicultural audience piece. If you do have questions, drop me a line. I know a lot of you are away and actually listening to this on replay, and now I'm actually going to go launch my company now. So Change Difference is actually launching today. So I'm really happy, and I hope to see you all in the next webinar. Lots of love, Cynthia.